duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Text 19. Tasmadasakta satatam karyam karma samachara asakto hyacharan karma paramapnoti purushaha. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the supreme. Text 20. Karmanaiva hi samsiddhim astitha janakadayah lokasangraham evapi sampashyan kartumarhasi. Even kings like Janaka and others attain the perfectional stage by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Text 21. Yad yadacharati shreshthas tatadeve taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tadunuvartate. Whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow in his footsteps, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Text 22. Na me parthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana na navaptam avaptavyam varta evacha karmani. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in work. Text 23. Yarihiyaham navarteyam jatu karmanya tandritaha mama vardmanuvartante manusya partha sarvashaha. For if I did not engage in work, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. Text 24. Utsideyo rime loka nakuryam karma chedaham sankarasya chakartasyam upahanyam ima prajaha. If I should cease to work, then all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would also be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all sentient beings. Text 25. Sukta karmanya vidvamso yata kurvanti parita karyad vidams tata saktash chakirshwar loka sangraham. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, similarly the learned may also act, but without attachment for the sake of leading people on the right path. Text 26. Na buddhi betam janayed agyanam karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani vedan yukta samacharan. Let not the wise disrupt the minds of the ignorant who are attached to fruit of action. They should not be encouraged to refrain from work, but to engage in work in the spirit of devotion. Text 27. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. Text 28. Wait. Oh. Jai. Haribol. Hare Krishna. Speaking of which, we're going to read the purport and translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhu. Who would like to read Toranath Prabhu? Do we have a microphone that reaches over here?
Text 17, translation. One who is, however, taking pleasure in the self, who is illumined in the self, who rejoices in and is satisfied with the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. Purport. A person who is fully Krishna conscious and is fully satisfied by his acts in Krishna consciousness no longer has any duty to perform. Due to his being Krishna conscious, all impiety within is instantly cleansed. An effect of many, many thousands of yajna performances. By such clearing of consciousness, one becomes fully confident of his eternal position in relationship with the Supreme. His duty thus becomes self-illuminated by the grace of the Lord, and therefore he no longer has any obligations to the Vedic injunctions. Such a Krishna-conscious person is no longer interested in material activities and no longer takes pleasure in material arrangements like wine, women, and similar infatuations.
Just like to say, if Maharaj would like to make any comments, please feel free to do so at any time. Does anybody know a pastime of Krishna's that connects to this purport that we just read? Yes, Mathuranath Prabhu.
Well, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not different than Krishna. And there is a pastime with Yogai and Madhe, where they were fallen brahmanas and they were indulging in these things, such as wine and women. And Lord Nityananda wanted nothing but to save them. And indeed, they hit him with a pot. And in turn, Lord Chaitanya was going to kill them. He was very angry. But instead, Lord Nityananda said, "No, please forgive these people. You're not Kalki Avatar. You didn't come to annihilate these people. You came to save them." And so, Lord Nityananda just begged them to chant Hare Krishna and take up this process. This is one of the many pastimes that exhibit this.
That's good. That's nice. Does anybody else know an example of a pastime specifically dealing with this part where Prabhupada said, due to his being Krishna consciousness, all impiety within is instantly cleansed, an effect of many, many thousands of yajna performances? Basically.
The wives of the Brahmanas.
Yeah, the wives of the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas are doing all these Vedic sacrifices to elevate themselves, to become more pious, but their wives already naturally had this affection for Krishna, which brings one to the highest state of being, establishing our loving relationship with Krishna. So, I don't want to speak too much. I want to read a lot of this because Prabhupada can describe all this much better than me. But in this chapter, Karma Yoga, it began in the first text. Arjuna is bewildered by Krishna's equivocal instructions. He's telling him to act one way, but don't act. He wants him to fight, but he wants him to not be attached to the results of his actions. So he's bewildered. So Krishna begins elucidating more on these points of how to act in the world without being attached to the results. And there were some of these texts that I really wanted to talk about. So let's keep reading. Who wants to read the next text? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. Text 18, translation. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Purport. A self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verses. A Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man, or demigod. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation.
You know, I was thinking about this. This thing is annoying. Anyways, I remember reading this for the first time, and thinking about it now, where from a devotee's point of view, it makes perfect sense to act in a way where you're not being attached to the fruits of your activities, but to a materialistic person, you tell them to do work and that they're not entitled to all the results of the work that they do. It's crazy. How can you understand that? We work so hard. Our whole life is built around working and acting in such a way so that we get attention, so we get credits, we get fruits for us to enjoy. But the devotee sees this as being bondage, because karma, whatever action we perform, there's a reaction. So the devotee is not entangled in this because he takes to the pure devotional service of the Lord, just wanting to render service to Krishna, and this is joyfully performed. And I remember specifically when I read this shloka, this sentence at the end, it says, "Nor has he any need to depend on any other living being." I just thought that was amazing. To be able to live in life and not be dependent on other living beings. You're just completely self-sufficient and satisfied. Because without that, we're always looking for some kind of justification, some kind of self-aggrandizement. We're acting in some way, so some kind of people will give us praise or will fit in, and it's always transient. We're always changing and shifting. And I mean, we can look at history just to see a good example of this. Like at least the history we learn in school. Every 10 years, things are completely crazy and different. There's new styles, new fashions, and new drugs, new movies, new everything people are getting completely enamored by. But the same principles are always there. So the devotee sees that and can see through that. So we take to this Sanatana Dharma, which is eternal occupation. And we know that only by rendering service to the Lord is the only way we'll actually become fully satisfied. So that's the goal, to give up our fruits unto Krishna. And if we can't take to full pure devotional service, then we act and we give whatever we can to Krishna. Because by giving our fruits to Krishna, then we'll become purified. Krishna describes this in the 12th chapter. He gives like a hierarchy of what's greatest. And if you can't do that, then do this. If you can't do that, do this. So there's never an excuse. There's never an excuse to not go further in Krishna consciousness. But we can make excuses. We'll make some excuse. I'm not pure enough. I'm not good enough. It's one excuse. It's actually an offense to the holy name. Shri Shri Gaura Ki Jai. Because if we are hearing the philosophy as it is, we hear that Krishna is the supreme pure. So if we're thinking that we're too lowly to partake in Krishna consciousness, then it's coming from a lack of understanding. And we might say, I don't have any doubts in the philosophy. I just doubt myself that I could do it. If we actually don't doubt the philosophy, then we'll see that that's not a reasonable doubt. Because whatever position that we're in, whatever circumstance, we can always do something to give more to Krishna. And whatever material circumstance that we have is never an impediment to bhakti. It never is. Whatever the material circumstance is, if you're paralyzed, if your throat is broken, you can't sing or chant, or whatever the situation is, bhakti is transcendental to that. So we just always have to push and pray and always remember Krishna. And Krishna, he'll provide the intelligence for us to come to him if we're sincere. Yes.
Thank you. I'm reading from text 27. You can read the translation. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. The Krishna conscious person
has so much detailed knowledge about the universe, about nature, about his body, his soul. All these things put together make him in the perfect position to decide how to live his life and what the purpose is and what to follow and not to follow, how to lead, how to have a family, how to be single, how to work and how to not work. Everything is explained. And by understanding, for example, here in this verse, that the material nature manufactures this body. The body is not a product of chance. It's not happening by accident. It's all very perfectly designed by nature. And there's 8,400,000 different species that are manufactured by nature. And that that's not us. We're not these bodies, we're not these dresses. But we're actually the soul, much more subtle. We're different than the mind, we're different than the intelligence. There's false ego. All these subtle factors. Without having this information, it's not possible for anyone to give perfect advice or to even decide perfectly or correctly how to lead his own life, because he just doesn't know essential features of how the thing is running. It's like someone who comes into a big factory and there's a big printing press, and he doesn't know anything about printing press. How can he take charge or how can he give advice? He needs to understand how it's working. So this is not material. Someone might think, well, this is material knowledge, how material nature is working. And what does that have to do with spirit? When the living entity understands how he's entrapped, how material nature works, he also sees material nature is not actually our enemy. Material nature is our friend, like Mother Nature, and the Father is Krishna. So without knowing that Mother and the Father, how can there be a good family arrangement? We're missing the important personalities, the Father and the Mother. And they're loving fathers and mother. Krishna is loving all the living entities. He generates them to exist eternally. He gives them eternal life. He gives them consciousness like himself. He even gives them a direct invitation to live in the spiritual world with him and his associates. How much more love can he show? He expands as Paramatma or Super Soul in the heart of every living entity. Even when the living entities are forgetful of him and ignore him, he travels with them, waiting to give them good advice when they're ready to listen. So why would we want to avoid such a person? Who's our ultimate well-wisher and who's the greatest father, and we have the greatest mother in the form of material nature. And if we look at the spiritual counterpart of Krishna, we have Srimati Radharani, Goddess Fortune, Lakshmi. It's just so incumbent to have this transcendental knowledge. And it's unfortunate that most of the world just has no interest in hearing about these things. At least they have no interest officially, like through educational systems and through regular training and guidance, moral guidance. These things are all lost. So without this knowledge, certainly one will be blind. He won't know how to proceed, and he won't know how to lead. So we have to be very dubious about electing someone who's blind to this transcendental knowledge, or following someone that's blind. And we have to make sure we don't become a blind leader ourselves and mislead others like children or others that are depending on us. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Maharaj. So, I'm going to read the next text where we left off. Text 19. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for the devotees, and liberation for the Supreme is the Personality of Godhead for the devotees, and liberation for the impersonalist. A person, therefore, acting for Krishna or in Krishna consciousness under proper guidance, and without attachment to the results of the work, is certainly making progress toward the supreme goal of life. Arjuna is told that he should fight in the battle of Kurukshetra for the interest of Krishna because Krishna wanted him to fight. To be a good man or a non-violent man is a personal attachment, but to act on behalf of the Supreme is to act without attachment for the result. That is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. Vedic rituals like prescribed sacrifices are performed for purification of impious activities that were performed in the field of sense gratification. But action in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to the reactions of good or evil work. A Krishna conscious person has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. He engages in all kinds of activities, but is completely non-attached. This is interesting. Prabhupada gave an example which pretty much highlights how the mode of goodness can be an impediment to spiritual life. Because one could be situated in sattva gun and okay, I have to live life peaceful. Or if I'm told I have to fight, then I won't fight because that's not right. We hold on to some conception of what we think is right or wrong. But Arjuna here is being instructed to fight because Krishna wants him to fight. This is Krishna consciousness. We give up our conceptions and we actually follow what Krishna wants us to follow. Because we're coming from our own conditional background, it might not mesh up, but our vision is not perfect. Krishna's vision is perfect. So when we follow the instructions of Krishna, then we'll be acting perfectly. Krishna gives us this Bhagavad Gita and all these other shastras as a manual to live our life. Like Maharaj said, it's not the material energy is necessarily an enemy or evil, but when we act improperly, then there's severe reactions. Severe reactions. But if we act properly, seeing that, oh, this is just an energy of the Lord, so it should be used in His service, and you're seeing everything in connection to the Lord, and then you hear from the Lord of how to act, you know how to avoid certain things or how to engage everything properly in Krishna's service, which some things are best left untouched, then things become really bright. You know, you can see the purpose behind everything. You know, something Maharaj was mentioning, it made me think about something how, you know, a lot of people believe in coincidences, or a lot of times like really funny or quirky things happen and people chalk it off to be a coincidence. But I remember personally, I started going beyond that and just saying, you know, everything happens for a reason. And, you know, I've known a lot of people who actually say that also, but there's always a cap on it. But when you actually start exploring that and really thinking what is the reason behind everything, and you start to see intricacies of how things are connected on subtle levels or gross levels, but it'll still never be perfect. But then when you hear from this higher knowledge that's beyond the confines of the material nature, then you could see that everything happens for a reason. It's all designed, but we might not be able to see it, such as like the Shastras describe the demigods being in control of the senses or the weather, or, you know, all these different facets of life. From our perspective, it doesn't seem like these things are happening at all. But when we hear from a higher perspective, we can understand that everything's happening for a reason. And, you know, we can go to one of the biggest things that we can think of with our feeble minds as our universe, the creation of our universe even. Modern science says it came from a big bang. Since when does things come from an explosion? What happened before the explosion? There's just nothing. And all of a sudden something happens and then there's something more. It doesn't make sense. To create something, there needs to be something. And then we can see within our practical example that people are the ones that are doing things. And, I've met a lot of people that they don't necessarily believe in God, but they believe in a higher power. And they'll put that highest power which they can actually conceive of being nature. But like I just mentioned, we can understand that nature is actually being controlled by the demigods, and the demigods are being controlled by the Lord. So then you can see how everything is actually working. We walk around, think we're so special because we grew up in a certain school system and we learned certain things, so we know a lot about the world. But in light of what I'm talking about, to the demigods, we're just like a little ant. You can look down and see an ant. I go sit outside on the prasadam table, like outside, and I always see ants, and they're just like running around in circles, zigzagging back and forth, going here, going there, going here. Seemingly like no point to their existence. They're just going around in circles, not really doing much. And if you try to tell them like, oh, there's a big city, there's all this going on, they're looking at you just like, they can't conceive of it at all. So like Maharaj was saying, most people don't want to hear this knowledge, or they can't understand this knowledge. But as we are approaching this in a humble and submissive mood, inquiring and trying to understand, then you can see how things are happening much, much bigger beyond us. And the Lord's powers are infinite. And the only way we'll be able to even get a glimpse of that is by understanding that I will never understand the potential that the Lord actually has. We have to accept that He is just, anything is possible for Him. He is completely infinite and full of all potencies. And when we really accept that, then there's room for us to actually understand more. But we always want to limit things through our conditioned outlook. So that's a few thoughts. Next text. Would you like to read Bhakti Prabhu? Text number 20.
Even kings like Janaka and others attain the perfectional stage by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Purport. Kings like Janaka and others were all self-realized souls. Consequently, they had no obligation to perform the prescribed duties in the Vedas. Nonetheless, they performed all prescribed activities just to set examples for the people in general. Janaka was the father of Sita and father-in-law of Lord Sri Rama. Being a great devotee of the Lord, he was transcendentally situated. But because he was a king of Mithila, a subdivision of Bihar province in India, he had to teach his subjects how to fight righteously in battle. He and his subjects fought to teach people in general that violence is also necessary in a situation where good arguments fail. Before the battle of Kurukshetra, every effort was made to avoid the war, even by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the other party was determined to fight. So for such a right cause, there is a necessity for fighting. Although one who is situated in Krishna consciousness may not have any interest in the world, he still works to teach the public how to live and how to act. Experienced persons in Krishna consciousness can act in such a way that others will follow, and this is explained in the following verse.
Okay, I'm going to read the next text. Whatever actions performed by a great man, common men follow in his footsteps, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. I was thinking of this, something related to this earlier, actually. Think about in our life, leading up to Krishna consciousness, all the people that we've idolized and viewed with the utmost respect that have influenced our lives. Might have been a musician, or a sports athlete, or an actor or actress, or so many different people. But the way I was thinking about it was, say I go outside and I'm stepping on the grass. What's the difference between like walking over top of one of these type of personalities versus the grass? Because if it's all just a material consciousness, then it's all subject to change. So one person's filling this role for the time being, and another person's filling this role. But when we are actually following bona fide spiritual instructors in the line of Lord Sri Krishna, then they're eternally situated. So they're fixed in reality. So when we follow their teachings, we also rise to the same platform, and we become free from the samsara. Because, one person right now is situated in a nice, beautiful body, and they could be very pious, but next birth they could be fallen down to the hellish planets. So devotee always sees this. Devotee, there's a shloka in the Bhagavad Gita, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastini Suni Chaiva Svapake Chapandi Tas Samadarshinaha. The devotee sees all living entities equally, whether it's the learned brahmana, the elephant, the cow, the dog eater, the dog, because he sees that there's a spiritual being within the body. Otherwise, there would be no life force there. There's no consciousness. And the super soul is also there, situated with this jiva, guiding them through this material existence based on their desires, their karma, and all these other things that are entangled with them, but always wanting to bring them back. But the devotee can see this, so we don't put our attention on that, and we actually follow people who are situated in this way of living of Krishna consciousness. And this is who should be glorified. Who should be famous. Nowadays, people get famous for the most horrible things. I might get some kind of surgery to make my body look more appealing to a certain kind of people, and then I become famous, and I become like a cultural leader for people, and everybody else is following this. This is what Maharaj was talking about, the blind leading the blind. We put our faith and our attention in people who are completely blind to the laws of the material nature, let alone the supremacy of the Supreme Lord. And then we're blinded too. So we're following also, and we're caught up in all the same problems that come with that. Because we're so brainwashed by growing up watching TVs, movies, seeing all the magazines. People appear happy, they appear wealthy, they appear beautiful. But you can't see what's going on underneath. That they're not satisfied, always hankering for more, always afraid of their losing what they have. So many problems, you could go and nitty-gritty pick them all out, but the devotee can see through these things, so we put our attention on those who are actually free from that, like our Srila Prabhupada is a perfect example of being above these modes of material nature. I remember one example I like to share about Srila Prabhupada in this regard is I remember following Srila Prabhupada. Actually, we were watching the Prabhupada movie this devotee made. We were watching it in here, in this big like projector screen. It's really cool. But Prabhupada was sitting at a hippie hill in San Francisco. It was like the spot where all the hippies went to. Everybody's hanging out, and you see Prabhupada sitting up, on top of the hill, and then there's just hippies with tie-dye, and they're doing drugs and smoking, and everybody's running around. It's really crazy, and Prabhupada is just sitting there, completely unfazed and unaffected by anything around him, because wherever he is, he's just going to be chanting Hare Krishna. He's going to be remembering Krishna. He's going to be utilizing whatever he can to serve Krishna. So that's what we're trying to do, is follow in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps and learn how to connect everything to Krishna also. And that way, we'll never forget Krishna. And if we never forget Krishna, Krishna will never forget us. But if we want to forget Krishna, then Krishna will allow us to forget. So to what degree do we want to know Krishna, to remember Krishna? That's the real question. And I feel like I mention this every class I give in different ways. And the shloka that supports this is Ye yatamam prabhajante tams tataiva bhajamiham mama vartmanuvartante manushaparta sarvashaha. According to our degree of surrender is the degree that Krishna reveals himself to us. He wants more than anything for us to turn to him with all love, all attention. Out of all the shlokas in the Bhagavad Gita, some are quite similar, where he reiterates same message, but there's two in particularly. They have at least 2 lines of the shlokas are the exact same. Does anybody know them? Matyaji mam namaskuru. Yeah, the first 2 lines are this. Krishna says, just give your mind to me, think of me. So Krishna, this is all he wants. It has the same exact meaning, but there's different words. But Krishna says, just think of me, give your mind to me, offer your obeisances to me. Surely you'll come to me because you're my dear friend. So the more that we enthusiastically endeavor to follow this process given by a pure devotee of Lord Sri Krishna, then we will make rapid advancement. But the more that we hold off, then the more Krishna holds back. And then if Krishna's holding back and we're afraid to surrender, there's going to be struggles because the material world, Krishna says, is filled with misery, temporary. It's just constant. It's constant mess. So when we take to serving Krishna, it's glorious. Sometimes it seems like we're not doing much. We're just washing the pots all the time, or we're just moving around dirt, or dealing with old broken windows, or we're just cooking all the time, doing all these things. But this is done for the pleasure of Lord Krishna, and we might not be able to see it, but this is the perfection of life, to actually work on Krishna's behalf and not to ours. There was something that we read on a few texts ago. I'll see if I can find it. Okay, Prabhupada said, to be a good man or a non-violent man is a personal attachment, but to act on behalf of the Supreme is to act without attachment for the result. That is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. That's a very powerful couple sentences. When we act without attachment for the results on the behalf of Krishna, that's the perfect action of the highest degree. But how do we know what's the proper action to do? This is why we take heed of our spiritual authorities. This is the parampara, because they're giving us actions and activities that are always related to Lord Sri Krishna. And we just have the perfect opportunity. Okay, let me serve and do my best and do it for Krishna. I was just reading earlier today about Jada Bharat. He was having a discussion with Maharaj Rahugana, and I believe it was one of the purports. I forget what was exactly said, but Jada Bharat was, Maharaj Rahugana began to chastise Jada Bharat because he wasn't carrying the palanquin very nicely. He's stepping on ants. He was avoiding stepping on ants. Everything was rocking, and he chastised him. And he said a lot of comments. And then Jada Bharat went through all of his comments, and he just opened it up with a much broader view and showed different examples of the extremes of both. Okay, if I am my body, then I'm doing it this way, but I am the spiritual soul. I can't explain it properly right now, but it's really nice. But the point being was that somebody could be carrying this palanquin, and like Jada Bharat, he's perfectly self-realized, spiritually situated, and he was acting just like a lowly person, okay, I'm just going to carry this palanquin for my own purification because this is my duty and this is what I have to do. I have my own karma. There's my own actions and reactions, so I just got to deal with it. But the difference is when you're thinking of Krishna, then you're doing these activities And you can always be situated in what Prabhupada just said, there's this perfection, there's this highest degree of action. So I could be, a mother or a father and have kids and raise my kids and do it in a Krishna conscious way. And this is actually a great duty. This is service to Krishna. So we all have different conditioned natures and different things that we have to work through so we can actually, learn how to utilize everything in Krishna's energy. Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions or thoughts? We have no more time. But if somebody would like to say something, yes. Bhaktin Arena.
Hare Krishna. I don't have much to say. Just wanted to say thank you. And something you said, I just wanted to repeat it because I appreciated it. Whatever material circumstance we have is not an impediment to our bhakti. I really like that. Because I think like that sometimes. Like, if I don't have this, then how could I do that? Or, if I don't look like this, then I won't be able to distribute that book. It's just little things like that. So I really like that you mentioned that. I also, one more thing, I like that you said that we could learn to accept that I will never entirely understand the potential that the Lord has. Because sometimes, I think, I just want to know everything about the Lord, but it's not possible. So, unless He desires that, He wants that for us. But anyways, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Krishna is infinite. We can't grasp the infinite, but we can act in a way that Krishna will pull us up to that, so He can show us whatever He wants to show us. But yeah, just to highlight this point again, because it's really good. There's no excuses. Even if, I have a broken back and I can't walk and do physical service, or I can't walk to the temple, you can still do service. You can chant in your mind. You can hear. You can remember the pastime. There's always something. But we're conditioned, so we have these bodily limitations, different problems with our mind, desires, all sorts of things. So just always keep doing more and more and more. And sometimes we might slip, but we pick ourselves up and keep going. We may fall down while practicing devotional service, but what happens to a baby when they're learning to walk? They fall down many, many times. So what's important is that we don't fall away. So we always stick in the association of devotees, and then we'll become purified. We'll become humbled. This is essential. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaura Premanandi Hari.